For me, being bipolar means that you'll have long periods of just feeling normal and having a job and doing what everyone else does. And there will be periods where your feelings of feeling low and down and depressed get so out of control that it gets to a point where you can't function, you can't work, you can't love, you can't get out of bed. And then there's this other extreme when you're totally high and you can't work and you can't love and you can't function and you're always out of bed.
Every night of the week I was going out, I was not sleeping. I believed I was the Virgin Mary. At the peak of the psychosis, I wanted to save everybody in the sort of red light district of Sydney, and I was a danger to myself. I wasn't a danger to others, but I was endangering my reputation.
I was in hospital for the first time for a very long time. I was in for about 5 or 6 weeks. That was when I was first diagnosed. That was when the doctor first came to me and said, "You have manic depressive illness," and I didn't have any idea what that was. I just sort of shrugged my shoulders and said, "Thanks very much, I'll see you later."
I probably first got it in my early teens, but I started using a lot of drugs. I was smoking a lot of pot and stuff like that, but I was really manic all the time. I always had too much energy, it felt like, and that's why I was smoking a lot of drugs to calm myself down.
Things were totally out of perspective, I was thinking about the lawn. How am I going to mow the lawn? I can't do it. I can't possibly do it, And that's sort of when you're depressed, you can't believe, how hard these things are.
For me, I usually get high after I've been depressed. So this makes it even more complicated because it means that as I start to feel better, the highness actually starts to make me feel normal in the beginning.
I sort of thought, gee, things are getting all right. I'm going to go up to Queensland on a trip. This is going to be good. And anyway, I'd swapped over. I'd swapped from depression to going high or manic, or whatever they call it. It's manic, isn't it? Yeah. And so anyway, I headed off on this trip and went up to Queensland and did parachuting, which, I know a lot of people do it, but, I've always been terrified of heights.
Then you go, well, so this is what normal people feel like. They don't have to sleep 12 hours a day and they feel confident and then you go, wow, this is great, and it is great.
I went marlin fishing and I went, took a trip up to the Cape York in a plane, and it was wonderful. I could do things, and make decisions. Buy a house, sell the house, I'm sick of that now.
You slowly begin to lose insight. You slowly start to not know what's happening.
You feel so on top of the world, like you're in charge and probably you're influencing Australia and you're going to make the place a better place, you're really good,
And then, you might start to think, well, maybe I am the son of God. And
there seem to be a number of types of bipolar disorder. There's bipolar 1 disorder, which is the type I have, and that's basically sort of extremes of mood, ranging from mania, which is often severe enough to need to go to hospital, and severe depression that, again, is severe enough to sort of need, 24-hour care, with risk of suicide. That's called bipolar 1 disorder. There's bipolar 2 disorder, where the person has fairly awful episodes of depression and episodes of hypomania, which aren't severe enough to get the person into hospital. So the person just appears to be pretty creative and energetic at times and pretty depressed at other times.
I view bipolar disorder as a very treatable condition. Although the mood swings can be quite severe, these days we have very good treatments for the condition. So I'm optimistic for the vast majority of people that I treat with bipolar disorder. The treatment, probably the centrepiece of treatment is medications, because it's a very physical condition. But these days we're becoming aware that there are significant psychological and social factors that can worsen the illness or contribute to it, or can be disrupted by the illness. So we're becoming increasingly aware of psychological treatments.
In some ways, for me, it was a relief to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder, because I could sort of say, well, okay, it's not my personality. I don't have a flawed personality. I now know what the limits are of my functioning are, and I do know now that there's medication that can help to reduce some of the sort of symptoms I've been getting.
It made a lot of things make sense. You know what I mean? Because before, any time I'd stop using drugs, it felt like I needed the drugs because I wasn't normal when, I wasn't using them. But it kind of made me understand that I just, had a problem. And so I, realised that there were other ways that I could kind of manage that problem, and that, allow me to take the drugs out of my life.
You think to yourself, oh, no, I couldn't have bipolar disease. You just sort of think that's somebody else, it shouldn't be you, That's the hardest thing. That's trying to accept that you've got the illness.
Oh yeah, acceptance is definitely the hardest thing. For so long it just takes, you just you're denying it, you're telling everyone else to get stuffed, and, you're not going to take the medication, and you don't need the medication. You'll find everyone else is stuffed, and everyone else will get buggered. It's like you versus the world. But when you're doing that, you've got you're expending so much energy. You're sort of like, it's you versus the illness and you versus the world. But then when you take the illness as part of you, it's almost like the illness can work for you.
The key to managing manic depressive illness is medication, and it's complicated medication. There's a whole range of medications, and it's powerful medication.
I tend to think of three phases of the illness that we're treating. The first is the treatment of acute mania, the second is the depressed phase of the illness, and the third is the prevention, stopping future episodes of depression and mania. If we look at the treatment of acute mania and the prevention, that the treatments are quite similar, that we're using what we call mood stabiliser medications. Mood stabilisers are medications that treat the acute unwellness during mania and prevent newer episodes. People would be most familiar with lithium, which has been around for 50 years.
When you get those highs and lows, it's not a good life, that's for sure. But now I've sort of evened out, and I don't get the mood swings. I feel a lot better. And I sort of look back to the times when I had those big mood swings, and I think, oh, geez, I don't want to do that again.
There are also two other treatments that we call mood stabilisers, and the brand names for those are Epilim, which is otherwise known as sodium valproate, and Tegretol, which is carbamazepine. And these medications are effective for calming the acute manic disturbance as well as stopping future episodes.
Lithium didn't work for me, and I think that's really important to let people know, because lithium's not always a wonder drug for everyone. It was only when I got on Epilim and Tegretol, although now I only take Epilim because I've gotten better, that my thinking was clear for the first time.
The good thing about the prophylactic drugs is that they don't interfere with your functioning. They don't affect your personality, they don't affect your creativity, they simply regulate the mood. People who are creative artists who take lithium say they're more productive, they get more things done when they're on lithium. It doesn't affect the way you view the world. All it will do is regulate the amount of energy you've got and help you to order that energy so that you can actually produce something at the end of it.
When people are manic, the behaviour can be quite disrupted. Now, the difficulty with the mood stabilisers is they're going to take about a week or two to work. So if you've got a family member who's acutely manic, You can't wait a week or two to start to calm the behaviour. We use the antipsychotic medications to calm someone down.
When I've been into the psychiatric wards and, I'd be there in a manic state, and you have the lithium, and I think they give you Medrol as well, probably the same as I have now. And, within a matter of a couple of days, you're sort of more normal.
Usually we withdraw the antipsychotic medications once the manic episode starts to settle. During the depressed phase of the illness, an antidepressant is usually going to be necessary as well as the mood stabiliser. Antidepressants are going to take normally 1 to 2 weeks to work, so you have to be patient and just give it time. Occasionally, if someone is very depressed, we might need to consider an older treatment such as ECT, but in these days this would be uncommonly used, although people shouldn't be scared if that's going to be necessary.
I've had a manic attack when I've been on lithium. I was on it, and I still got it. But see, then it comes into, like we were saying before, if you're under stress. I was under stress then. I was sort of moving around and that, trying to find places to sort of stay, and it stressed me, and I reckon that's why I had the manic attack.
You can religiously take your pills, but, if there's some stress in your life, it's not going to sort of protect you entirely. It may mean that you won't have quite as severe an episode as you would have had without the pills, but it may not mean, it may be that you're still going to have an episode of mood disorder anyway, despite taking the medication.
The choice was to take your medication. You might not be well, like you might still be up and down, but it's better than taking no medication at all, because I had one episode where I was going out with a particular man who was very health conscious, and bless his heart, he was trying to do the best. He didn't like me taking medicine. So we went on a naturopath journey, but didn't actually see a naturopath, and went jogging in the morning instead of the antidepressant. We replaced everything with natural things, drank honey and milk at night instead of a sedative. But there was no mood stabiliser, and that's what I have a mood disorder. And very quickly I went into the worst psychotic episode I have ever had, where I was homeless. I left home. I didn't think there was anything wrong with being homeless.
I know myself, when I was told you've got to take this medication, I didn't want to take medication. I felt fine. Why should I take medication, particularly when it gives me some side effects that I don't like? But I think from what I've learned over the years, I now know that it's essential to take the medication.
Let's have a look at some of the side effects that can occur with some of the medications that we use for bipolar disorder. If we look at lithium, I guess in the first few days, the most common side effects when that's instituted are nausea, which is a sick feeling on the tummy, occasionally vomiting, although in my experience that's most uncommon, and diarrhoea.
Taking lithium for the first time, I couldn't stand it. I had trouble taking the tablets physically. I was gagging on the tablets at the beginning. For me, they were quite large tablets. Nowadays, I can take a truckload of the things and not have a problem. But I didn't like the way they made me feel. I had problems with my hands, and I still have problems with my hands to this day. My hands tremor and shake all the time, pretty much, and it's a very disconcerting and embarrassing thing for me.
These usually settle down. If they don't, they respond to a reduction in the dose of the medication. They're what we call dose-related side effects. I guess one of the other side effects that long-term worries people is that of weight gain, and about 30 to 40% of people who are taking lithium do gain weight. This is very frustrating. I advise people to be very careful about their diet. Occasionally people get craving for sweet foods, and people find that often because of the thirst, which is another side effect on lithium, that they might take many soft drinks.
There are long-term side effects for epilim as well that I'm aware of. So it is, you need to know that there could be side effects for things, and but don't stop. I never stopped taking my medication because of the side effects, and I think that stood me in good stead. At the time, some people didn't agree with me, but they were the ones getting ill and I wasn't, so yeah.
After taking the lithium for a time, I just accepted and, tried to make the best of it. And after a while, I just didn't even know I was really taking it. It becomes part of life. But it's very important I do take it twice a day. Otherwise, I can become unwell.
Coming on and off medication is dangerous. I don't recommend doing it unless you consult with your doctor or health worker about why you want to come off the medication or whether you need to change the medication or what have you. Some of the drugs that are used to treat people with bipolar disorder do have consequences if you come off them abruptly. You do need to come off the drugs under some kind of medical supervision, and to have some kind of medical information about, how you come off the drugs and what effects are going to happen, if you come off the drugs and what have you. I'm very grateful to medication. I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for medication. But it is hard work learning about what the medication can do, what type of medication I need to take and when I need to take it. It really does mean having a good working partnership, with your doctor to find out, what medication's available, when you need to take it, how much you need to take, and to have a sort of close monitoring to make sure that the effects you're getting from the medication are in fact reducing the symptoms of the mood disorder.
I'm talking the last 3 or 4 years, I've been hospitalised about 6 times, mainly because of cannabis. I have a period of about 2 to 3 days only, maximum, before I'm totally off with the fairies. Seeing things sometimes, hearing voices even, full schizoid delusions. So going from not eating and sleeping and being a bit irrational, and my mum is good at spotting those sort of traits these days, to being totally out of it.
I think it's important to recognise that people can prevent relapses of mood disorder. You might not be able to prevent the first episode because you've got no idea it's going to happen. You may not be able to prevent the second episode because, hey, you're still learning. But one of the things that I find really interesting and amazing is that as people get older, they do learn to prevent the episodes. And I think there's a number of things that people can do. One is to look at your previous episodes and say, what was going on in my life around about those episodes? What kind of triggers are likely to sort of set me off? Is it illness in a close friend or family member? Is it travelling? Is it, shift work? Is it breaking up a relationship? What is it? What are the sorts of stresses that trigger me off? What happens when I, get under stress? Do I stop sleeping? Do I stop eating? Do I, take on more activities? But what actually happens?
With me, usually it's if I miss a bit of medication or I'm not sleeping, this will lead to the symptoms of mania, and the early warning signs are not sleeping, not eating, being irritable, acting a little bit irrationally. And then with me, the problem is I have a very small space of time with which any intervention can be made. I'm talking 2 or maybe 3 days where they can come in with some antipsychotic medication or something like that, and before I'm put into hospital.
You may not be able to recognise what's going on. I find that really difficult. I find it very difficult to sit here and say to you, look, I know a lot about what triggers off my episodes. I know what to do. But on the other hand, given a sort of period of time after a stressful event, I'm actually not capable of carrying it out. I have to trust somebody else. And that's very difficult. It's very difficult for anybody to do, to say, well, there may come a time in the future where I'm not going to be able to have control over my life. Okay, so the next best thing is to decide on, one person or a couple of people and tell them what's likely to happen and give them permission to help you out at that particular time. Write it out as a kind of contract. If I'm not sleeping, I give you permission to contact my GP or my health worker, and I will agree, to do whatever you tell me to do at that particular time. I trust you to do that. And that, I think, is pretty important. It certainly saved me from ending up back in hospital quite a few times now.
One of the interesting triggers was talking really, really fast. So it was very subtle, and if you could pick it up quite early, you would know. At the time, it was hard on my brother because I wouldn't believe him, and I'd say, "What are you talking about? I'm just confident." And also, I talk fast naturally, but he'd find the subtlety. And the other trigger was beginning to reduce my hours of sleep. So it would be very slight. It might start off with 5 hours instead of 7.
Well, some of the early warning signs are like increased activity and irritability, and I'd say, you go about things faster, that sort of thing. Well, the trouble is with those signs, they're, you're already into the manic attack, you know what I mean? You've passed the point of no return. They're not as easy to recognise, but the sleeping is, That's that's why I grabbed it, because it's an early one.
It seems to be the not sleeping that, builds up the mania. So if you can recognise that, hey, look, when I'm under stress, my sleeping patterns start to get disrupted, then maybe one of the things that's important to do is to start to maybe write down a list, for a close friend to say, look, if I go for more than a couple of nights without sleeping, or if you've noticed, we've noticed over the last week that my sleeping patterns have got shorter and shorter and shorter, then it's really important that I get some kind of medication to help me to sleep. Maybe I get my lithium levels checked or what have you. But, maybe we've got to sort of do something to make sure I get some sleep.
When I went up to my son's there and I didn't sleep, and I thought, I'm not going to sleep the next night. I thought, well, I'm not having this, so I'll take this Methadol, and I slept. Yeah.
I know for me that if I start to take drugs again, or if I feel the need to do that, then I obviously know that something is going wrong, because I self-medicate with drugs. So basically I take a lot of medication, usually, by taking drugs. But it was only not long ago that I actually had a really heavy stint with drugs, and I know that there was something going on then, and I actually went and saw a psychiatrist after that, and she put me on more medication. But if I feel the need to do that, or if I find myself, hanging out with people that I used to hang out with, and, I'm just putting myself back into situations that weren't healthy for me, I know that there's a problem. Also, if I stop going to work, or I stop, taking care of myself, then I know that I'm obviously not feeling too good about myself, and that there's a problem. And I always, if there's a problem, I get together with my mental health worker, who we talk it through, or I go and see a psychiatrist. I never just let myself go and see what's going to happen. I never do that.
People can, prevent relapses. Okay, it might mean, a few weeks of going back onto, a different kind of medication, or changing the medication, or slowing down your life. But hey, that's going to be a lot better than 3 months in hospital.
It only takes 1 or 2 puffs of a joint, and I get this instantaneous sort of really strong euphoria. It's like a really strong, fuzzy, warm feeling. It's a really nice feeling, and that's the problem I have. I like smoking this stuff, and a lot of people do, but the outcome just isn't worth it. I mean, just about every time I've smoked it in the last 3 years, I've ended up in hospital. Almost every time. Maybe every time.
I view marijuana as poison for somebody who has bipolar disorder. That might seem an extreme statement, but I've seen so many people with bipolar who just so rapidly go into a manic or depressed episode after taking marijuana.
There's no doubt in my mind, or anybody else's, that is the main reason, just about the only reason, I will become unwell in such a short space of time. With cannabis, it's just a big blowout. It just happens almost overnight. It's scary.
I was constantly depressed and tired. I couldn't motivate myself to do anything. And it was really scary. It wasn't just physically, it was, mentally. It used to really freak me out. I used to, thought I was hallucinating. I would see things all the time. you know, like silhouettes of people running at night time especially, and it was just really nerve-wracking. I couldn't handle it. And that was all brought on by this drug that I actually thought was taking these symptoms away.
Some people just take small amounts and that precipitates an episode. So that people who are in that situation have to understand that if they want to get their lives under control, then they might just have to stop taking that marijuana or control their alcohol use.
I used to drink every day, you know, and quite a bit. And I miss it now. I'd like to drink again, but I can see, you know, it's one more problem for your brain. So I mean, you don't really need it, do you?
I was speaking to my case manager just the other day about it actually, and he was saying that. I said to him, look, I want to thresh this out. I want to say to you, how many drinks do you think I can have? You know, what's the limit? And he said, okay, let's look at it this way. Maybe 4 or 5 beers in a night, spaced out. I think what he meant to say was just use your common sense. If you start to feel yourself getting a bit, you know, or if you feel you're getting to the stage where you're losing a bit of reason, you know, that's the thing. I've always got to have a bit of reason about me if I'm to succeed in not having any dope.
Yeah, I can understand why people drink with mental illness. It's sort of, you know, when you sober up, of course, it's like anybody else. It's probably doubly worse. You know, you still got your mental illness and you got a hangover as well.
I think being diagnosed with bipolar disorder creates some real dilemmas about how you're going to manage the rest of your life. Okay, so maybe you can decide it's never going to happen to you again and you can just go on the way you've been going. But I think most people who have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and have had, you know, a couple of fairly severe episodes that have been pretty majorly disruptive in their lives do have to make some decisions about the kind of lifestyle they're going to lead. And that might mean deciding that you simply can't cope with shift work, or that you simply can't cope with a job that means you've got to leave home at 5 a.m. in the morning, or that you can't go to nightclubs every night and dance the night away, or that you can't stay up all night writing essays.
It's just it's making sure I sleep well. And when I say sleep well, I mean, like, for me, it's about 10 hours a night. Like, it's not, you know, 7 hours or whatever. I have to get a really good sleep. I have to eat well. It's just about eating. It's not so much the food I eat, it's just about eating regularly. I have to eat morning, lunch, and night. Finding a job was a big one for me. It was really hard for me to find a job because I had nearly no experience. I had nothing. But when I finally found one, it was one of the best things that ever happened. You know, I finally had money to look after myself.
Maintaining a sort of reasonably stable lifestyle is important for me. The people I live with are important too. I mean, I happen to live with a person who's a pretty regular kind of guy in terms of, you know, meals are on time, meals are regular. He has a sort of fairly regular routine, and that really helps me. I think if I'm living with people who themselves are chaotic, it just sort of accentuates the chaos in me.
The main thing that I like to do in my life is just a balance of everything. A bit of exercise, the rhythmic sensation of running along on a pavement. It's just very hypnotic for me, and it just makes me, I can think about things in my head, and it's healthy for me. Being healthy for me is important. When I think about the happiest times in my life, it's always been the healthiest times in my life. I play a bit of organised sport on the weekends too. I know all the people there. I've been going for a number of years, and it's the familiarity of it all. It's very therapeutic for me to do things like rugby and the running and things like that at fixed times during the week, because it just makes me feel safe. You know, I mean, I've had so many times in my life where I felt alone or scared or not safe. Also, I just like spending just relaxed times with my friends and taking my dog for a walk. Just little things like that I enjoy doing, and reading, things like that. If I can do a little bit of of each of those things every week, I'm a happy camper.
I swim. Yeah, it's great. No, helps me lose weight from the weight gain from the pills I've got to take. Keeps me fit. Yeah, it's good. I've just started a yoga course. You know, we deal with yoga stretches to stretch out your body, gets rid of all the tension in your body. Oh yeah, this is the other thing too. For me at least, meditation is, if you can get to some course, there's so many different types of meditation, and if you feel uncomfortable about it, it's not always about people sitting in strange positions with their legs around their heads, and there's a whole range of types that you can do, you know, ranging from the bit sort of new agey to the not so new agey. You just got to get out there and look under M in the yellow pages and start ringing around and asking people. And
they're a fairly biased group in the sense that not everybody... I do find it difficult giving lectures at 8 a.m. in the morning if I'm on medication. That's something I've had to work out with my supervisor at work. So, I mean, I do have to take responsibility to sort of say to my supervisor, look, I'm on medication at the present moment. I do get a medication hangover. I really don't function very well in the mornings when I'm on medication. But I'm happy to work in the afternoons and the evenings. Because I need, you know, to get a reasonable night's sleep, I can't work late one night and start early the next morning. Okay, sometimes that's unavoidable, in which case then I have to take the following day off to sort of recover. But it really does mean sort of working out how my job and the things I'm doing are affecting my mood and my mental state.
Some people actually get a lot of therapeutic benefit out of having a dog or a cat, especially if they're living on their own. If you've got a dog or a cat that you love, you know, I've heard people that said that they would stay well for the sake of their dog, because if they had to go into hospital, their dog couldn't be fed, you know? Simple stuff like that.
In addition to the medications, it's important to be aware that many people will benefit from psychological treatment or counselling. The illness has a huge impact upon sufferers' self-esteem and confidence.
I could have done with some sort of counselling to help me with the devastation of what it was like to go from being king of the castle to being a zombie in a psych ward, because that is devastating. So you need the counselling to deal with the devastation of what it's done to your life, and God, even my family could have done with some help.
Seeing a counsellor for me was amazing because of her style. She actually got angry with me one time because whenever she would say to me, well, why don't you go out and get your driver's licence? Why don't you apply for uni or do this? That's what you want to do. And I'd always say, but I'm a consumer. I can't do that because I'll get sick, or no, that's not offered, that's not allowed for me. There was always a block. And I was afraid, and she got really angry one day and said, from now on, every time you walk into my office, you leave your mental illness at the door, can wait for you when you get home, and you come in as Vicky.
From my experience, you need a balance of medication and counselling. Like, if you just take the medication, it's not good enough. If you just take the counselling and the brain chemistry goes haywire, then you're stuffed.
I think cognitive behavioural therapy is one of the most effective counselling approaches for people with mood disorders, because in effect it sort of says, look, you know, don't believe everything you think, because what you think is dominated really by the mood. If I'm depressed, I believe that I'm hopeless and worthless and I'll never achieve anything. You know, cognitive behavioural therapy certainly helps in terms of looking at the reality of the thinking patterns, and certainly helps to work out, you know, what's a depressive thought pattern, what's a manic thought pattern, and what's a okay thought pattern, if you like. One of the things I found after I was diagnosed was that I'd never met anybody else with manic depressive illness. I mean, I probably had, but they hadn't been open about it, so they weren't talking about it. But I hadn't actually ever sat down and talked with somebody else who'd been through similar kind of episodes to me. And I really wanted to meet with other people to sort of say, well, did you have the same kind of symptoms? Did you take this medication? How long did you take it for? Did it work? Did it not work? Did you recover is what I really wanted to know.
And find yourself a support group. People don't go there to, whinge and gas bag. Just say, look, we just exchange stories about, oh, have you tried this medication? Oh, that's great, I found a great doctor. Oh, where does he practice? The food at this hospital is really bad. Don't go there.
It was probably one of the sort of peak experiences of my life, actually. I think the things that were important for me was sort of recognising that the symptoms I'd experienced, like being the Virgin Mary, being very grandiose, spending all my money, being suicidal, blah, 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 everybody else had gone through.
I was initially very scared of going there, and I hardly spoke in the beginning because I'd just been diagnosed and I was always getting unwell. But I could not believe in that support group there were people there was a woman who had a PhD and she was a professor and she was going to work every single day, and when I talked to her and I heard her story, I realised that our stories are similar. She thought she was the Virgin Mary, so did I.
They'd all gone through it, so you've been the Virgin Mary, well, so have I, so what, And it sort of normalised it, if you like. Sounds funny to say, but it did normalise it. It was like, well, okay, so it's something that happens, People think they're the Virgin Mary or Jesus Christ when they're manic. Okay, it's a common sort of thing. So it helped me to sort of recognise what the symptoms were. And I guess it wasn't so horribly me and unique. One of the awful things about mental illness is feeling that there's something peculiarly horrible about you, that you're the only one in the world who's ever gone through this terribly frightening, terribly sort of terrifying sort of experience. It's somehow comforting to know that other people have gone through it too, and they've survived, and they've come out the other end.
And it's such a relief to know that you're not doing this alone, because that makes it really hard, and especially for guys, because we don't talk about this, and we die from this.
I mean, the doctor can say, if you take this medication, this is what will happen, but maybe you don't believe it. And I remember very clearly one woman who had been on lithium for 8 years, and this was at a time when, buggered if I was going to take lithium, I was feeling really nuke about taking it, but on the other hand, pretty terrified about having another episode. And she'd been taking it, and there was no big deal. And sure, she was getting a few side effects that she thought were fairly minor, but it had given her the security to sort of, raise her kids and, sort of the confidence that, within 8 years she hadn't had a major episode. So that actually was one of the sort of key things in making me decide that, well, okay, if I'm this worried about having another episode, there's nothing too dreadful and awful about taking lithium, for a period of time until I'm sort of confident and can discuss with the doctor about the possibilities of not taking it again. What do you reckon?
Sounds pretty good to me. When I'm sick, I tend to go and visit my friends and sometimes my family at very early times in the morning or late at night because I'm full of energy. I'm zipping around everywhere. It's a very awkward time for me, and as a matter of fact, it's put a bit of a strain on some of my friendships, my family.
This is, in essence, a physical condition akin to diabetes, akin to a cancer or heart disease. Now, there are clearly factors that can make and behaviours that can make the condition better, but in essence, it's physical. I think that's an important point. Because even carers and spouses, those closest to the individual, can sometimes be stigmatising, can sometimes be putting the person down if they're not careful. So I think to respect the fact that this is an illness no different to many others in medicine.
I think family and friends are very important in terms of providing supportive environments or providing some kind of structure in the person's life. And it can be very difficult to move from looking after someone who's totally dependent, as people often are when they're very depressed, to, treating the person as a responsible adult who can sort of get on with the rest of their life and what have you. I think it's fairly important for family and friends to get information about just what manic depressive illness actually is. Maybe talk with other family and friends, who have been through it. and maybe negotiate with the person about what the person wants them to do or not to do.
I think it's important that if you do notice something, to say something. A lot of the time you wonder if it's your place to say something, and maybe you should leave it up to them. And sometimes you get a negative response if you say something like that, but at least you've opened their eyes up to that, option. Like, at least you've said to them that, well, look, there is something that you can do about it. And obviously if it went too far, then I would actually make an appointment for them.
I think in general, most people with the illness afterwards are pleased if they're brought into treatment early. Now, that's not always true, because I've had some family members who say they've never been forgiven for getting their relative in contact with professionals. I think that's in general the minority.
Take my mum for example. Sometimes she got to the point where she was no longer in touch with reality, and she didn't know that there was something wrong, you know what I mean? She thought everything was going well, so how can someone expect her to go and make an appointment when she thinks she's fine? So, that was, my time to step in then.
Maybe the best thing is, if the health worker, the person, and, a support person can get together and to say, well, okay, what's happening at the present moment, what are the kind of supports that are going to be needed in the future, if there's a relapse, who's going to do what, is it possible for the person to be looked after at home, should the person go to hospital, what are the sorts of likely scenarios. And I think, I don't want to damage my relationships, for example, by being so sort of ill that it's going to sort of damage my relationships. It's probably going to be better for me to go to hospital and be looked after professionally than to put too much strain on my existing relationships.
There was a time there I was unwell. Well, I was in hospital 3 times in the space of about 6 months or something, It was just crazy. And that was mainly cannabis related. My family, I think, was starting to crack a bit. The generous cup was starting to runneth over. It was just getting to the point where they didn't have any more reserves to call upon. And they were just starting to lose it a bit. But they still managed to visit me in hospital, and that's important. When you're in hospital, if no one comes to see you, you get pretty dark on yourself. And my mum and my dad, especially, every day, same time. It was really nice, It's just, you look forward to those little visits.
I don't know, actually.
Is it brownie points for something? Brownie points or 3.
I think the important thing to remember is that you can have a life, you can have a successful life with bipolar disorder. I remember after I was first diagnosed, my partner took me out to dinner, a really nice restaurant. We're sitting there looking out at the view, and I'm sitting there saying, boo-hoo, I've got bipolar disorder, it's the end of my life as I know it, and what have you. And I sort of stayed quite depressed actually for sort of a few days, and then it sort of gradually went away and what have you. And after a period of time I learnt that in fact, I could do the things I'd always done. In fact, I could do more than I'd always done, because now at least I had some mechanisms for ensuring that, the episodes of depression didn't go on forever. I could in fact prevent, some of these episodes from occurring. And I actually had some control over my life.
You are more than your illness. You are not manic depressive, You are John Smith, who's 33 years old, who barracks for Essendon, who works at so-and-so, has got 2 kids, a dog, and a few mates, whatever. That's you. Oh, and you happen to have manic depression.
You've just got to make sure that you look after yourself, and if you feel like you're going down, you just got to remember which one's better. You're feeling well or you're feeling low, and like you're not worth anything. Which one do you prefer? I always choose feeling good about myself, so I constantly want to take care of myself,
Bipolar disorder is a very treatable condition. For the vast majority, the commencement and the continuation of adequate and appropriate treatment just makes such an enormous difference. And I've seen that with many patients that I've treated, that I view this optimistically, this condition, that although it's difficult and disorganising and terrible condition, that when the treatment's right, it just makes such an enormous difference. So I view this very optimistically.
I think you've always got to be conscious of this illness. It never really goes away completely, but you can control it to the point where it doesn't control you. You control it, and life just is there for you to take and experience. Yeah. It's a wonderful life. Yeah.